Hey everybody, welcome back to Giant Talk, the world's first podcast brought to you alongside the guys at Coan. This week I'm delighted to have with me Reid Koster from Betterworks. Reid, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lawrence. I'm excited to talk with you.
No worries at all. So we're going to be talking really about how to get yourself set up to really launch an OKR program, with purpose and with gusto, I suppose, and put yourself in the best place to do it right first time. But before we get into that, Reid, tell us, a little bit about yourself, your background, who Betterworks are, and what your role is there.
Yeah, absolutely. My role is OKR practice lead at Betterworks, and we're
Okay.
an OKR and sort of agile coordination software at, um, based in Redwood City. We have an office in New York, which actually might become our headquarters now that everyone is working dispersed.
Hmm.
But I'm still in the Bay Area, and I've been with the organization for 4.5 years now. And as OKR practice lead, my focus is really developing our implementation best practices, um, as well as working with our customers during that onboarding time, usually to run these executive coaching sessions and workshops, as well as help them with their program design. So I've been in that role for about 2 years, but been running OKR implementations since I joined Betterworks. So that was 2016.
Right. Okay. So well versed in what it takes to put together a good OKR program then.
Yeah, we've seen a lot. I think the deeper you dive into OKRs, and I'm sure this is probably your point of view as well, but it's like a crowdsourced methodology.
Yeah.
So you learn lots of tools, tricks and tips along the way, but there's no right answer for every organization. But there's some themes that are worth knowing when you're embarking on this.
Absolutely. So what are the types of companies and organizations you typically run your implementations with, Reid?
Yeah, so runs the gamut for type of industry. I'll typically get involved with our more enterprise sized organizations because they will usually need greater support or they want more engagement at the executive level
Right.
during implementation. But we are, aside from, tech companies because of our presence in the Bay Area, we have a fair number of organizations in media, finance, we have government, we have some nonprofit. So, you know, there's really there's no industry where OKRs make more sense than others. And, in the past, I know with John Doerr, flying around and talking about measure what matters with organizations, he was getting a lot of interest in the past year and a half from healthcare specifically, right? So uh, we've seen some of that as well, where healthcare organizations lately are really looking to transform and modernize stateside.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a very traditional industry, I suppose, but a very
Right,
well financed industry that really needs to come into the modern era, isn't it?
right. And with just the state of uh, political influences in the US, it needs to change and it needs to become more focused on outcomes than just on the traditional models for making money,
Yeah,
health
absolutely.
outcomes.
Okay, so say I was, running a business, thinking of signing up with Betterworks and got put in touch with you. Is it just as simple for launching OKRs as kind of, signing up to the software and cracking on with it?
Not that simple, and we would never surprise you. You would never sign up, and then I would show up on a call and tell you you have to
You
slow down.
horrify me.
Yeah, we usually lay out pre-sales pretty well what to expect during an implementation, and I think what the typical line is that expect that really we're going to spend about 20% of your time during the implementation phase, let's say 8 weeks. Only 20% of that is really getting the technology set up and configured.
Right.
The remaining 80% is working with your business to build out a program that makes sense with your culture and your desired outcomes, right? And That's actually the program design is phase one of those things, and we can start setting up integrations to your HRIS systems. But what I'll work with our customers on, and our services team, is starting day one to talk to executives, the program team, and start developing the vision for the program that translates well into a set of clear guidelines that can be supported by our technology in the long run.
Interesting. So, you know, from all this experience that you've had over the past few years, then kind of what have you boiled down to be the critical elements of a program design where OKRs are concerned?
Yeah, so critical elements, step one is we want to determine the program team with an organization and help them understand which roles are important to have in place for long-term success. I've seen program teams that balloon up to 12 to 15 folks. That might be too much to be dedicated and really focused on the program over the long term. But in any team, there are two roles you need to have. We call that the program lead and the executive sponsor. In a perfect world, the executive sponsor is your CEO or the head of your organization.
Yeah.
As a visionary, someone who can communicate the expectations for OKRs and the reason you're doing it. They're the type of voice that's really going to shock people into understanding that this is the new way of doing business.
Yeah.
But you don't always have to have your CEO. You just need someone who is high enough up in an organization to both communicate the change and also be a model of how OKRs are supposed to become a part of the organization. And the program lead, this is a role which doesn't fit completely cleanly into any sort of functional role in an organization. We've seen successful program leads on the HR team. We've seen others on the strategy team. We've seen others who are chiefs of staff. But really, I think the common characteristic of a strong program lead is someone who is both focused on executing the scheduling and tasks of just managing the program quarter over quarter, but at the same time having sway and confidence in speaking with the executive team, right?
Yeah.
Because there's that element of needing to manage down in the organization and coordinate that things are happening on time, but also being tough on the executives and being able to share whether or not they're fulfilling their duties as being sponsors and effective advocates of the program.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you've highlighted the sort of roles there that are really good for that, whether it's a chief of staff or a COO or an HR director.
Yeah.
They're the roles we tend to see fitted a lot there.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, you can have other extremely valuable folks who are part of your implementation, whether it's on the comms team or the internal education team. But if you don't have the sponsor and the program lead, it's really going to be tough to get this off the ground.
So what does the sort of governance structure look like around that program team then?
Yeah, so during implementation, things can be 100 miles an hour, a little bit hectic, where you're getting folks together and you're trying to make decisions quickly so that you can fulfill the leader's vision of beginning an OKR program throughout the organization. So there is this element of, hey, we're in the midst of a project right now, and the team is heads down working on execution. But it is valuable to bring in a group of people. Sometimes we'll call it a steering committee, which doesn't need to be part of the chaos of that implementation. In the day-to-day, week-to-week execution level, but is a group that can give strategic guidance and also is brought up to speed on the decisions being made at that level, right? So with a steering committee, this is probably a valuable place to have your executive sponsor as well as some other key folks in the business you know, they might be other leaders, they might be folks on the strategy team who can come together and just understand the changes we're proposing to make and the sorts of ways we're going to measure success down the line, and check in with them, you know, maybe every couple weeks or every month during implementation. But really, that group is there to understand at a bird's eye view level uh, what's going to make the program successful over time. Um, they don't need to help make a decision on which slides belong in the training deck, for example.
But they can help expose more people to that training deck, I suppose.
Sure, yeah, and they'll understand pretty early on, you know, if we check in prior to launch and we give the plan for what our program vision is going to be,
Yeah.
they might say, hey, you know, just so you know, this word agile that you've included in the program vision, that might have some conflict with my engineering team because we've been running Scrum, and that
Mhm.
has a different meaning, right? So it might actually be valuable for us to frame this slightly differently with
Yeah.
the engineering org, right? And those sorts of, that sort of input uh, from a high level is useful um, for longer term success.
Right. So it's about, I guess, building a community there then that's kind of dedicated to the cause, but sits outside the chaos.
Exactly. And you know, there's always a secondary value to having these executives involved, which is just having them feel like they're a part of the process, and this is not a foreign methodology that's being forced upon
Mm.
the organization, right? Even if, you know, even if they don't have a lot of uh, proactive feedback about changing how we're going to roll out the program, just being a part of that meeting and being asked an opinion can help bring them along for the journey and
Yeah.
bring them into your corner as advocates quicker.
Pays dividends in the long run.
Yeah, exactly.
So interested just to pick up on a comment that you made there about measuring success. And how do you kind of go about then deciding with a client when you're doing an implementation how they can look for success with OKRs? Because, like you said, it is a bit of a crowdsourced methodology, and
Sure.
everybody uses them slightly differently.
Yeah, the way we'll do it, there's two different measures of success. I'll categorize that we'll talk about during an implementation. The first is after we've walked through, discussed with executives, and really understood the program vision for the organization, right? What are the actual values or outcomes you're looking to drive? You've probably heard that phrase that, you know, all OKR programs need to be adapted to your organization before you commit to them. So ideally what we're doing is we're adapting OKRs so that they are focused on solving for alignment or commitment or stretching, whichever of the OKR facts resonate most with the organization. Once we have an understanding of, you know, alignment or focus or commitment being the most important outcomes, we can start looking at what areas of engagement with the Betterworks platform might be a pretty good indication of whether or not that's happening.
Right.
So alignment, obviously we can track whether or not objectives are connected with each other in any meaningful way. And we can start reporting quarter over quarter on, here's your trend with alignment, which teams are connected to higher level organizational objectives, which groups aren't as much, right? Or commitment, what cadence of updates to OKRs are happening and in which groups and which aren't, right? So there is that idea of we can track platform engagement, which we think matches somewhat well with the elements of the facts that you're trying to drive.
Hmm.
Um, but of course, that's just tracking connection with our software, right? So how do you then look at whether or not real changes to the business are taking place? And so the other measures of success program that we talk about is actually new, but it's a survey which we'll launch with our customers when they're first coming on board that helps baseline these areas of subjective, subjective, I guess, feelings in the business, right?
Right.
So trust and leadership, how aligned are we as an organization? How accountable are we? And a number of questions for each of those areas. We can get a baseline upfront before rolling out OKRs and Betterworks, and then we can check in with pulse surveys to see how that's trending over time.
And how do
Obviously,
you check in on those then?
how do you check in on
How
the?
often? Sorry.
Yeah, so again, this is new. One thing we always want to be careful of is if an organization has a surveying strategy for engagement on the people team, that um, we're not doubling up on surveys.
Yeah.
But if you can do follow-up pulses, I think quarterly around certain areas that you're focused on within that, that's valuable. If that's too much, I think every 6 months is useful to
Yeah.
see whether or not the changes are taking place.
Mm.
But again, this is new, so I think we're still feeling out what's the right cadence with the surveying function. But one thing we did do was we looked at sort of all of these different elements of engagement survey, statistical elements of what's actually impactful, what's actually important to measure, what are the right questions to ask for those areas of influence.
Mm-hmm.
And we've whittled it down to a fairly concise version that's focused on OKR outputs, right? And is not as broad as a full engagement survey.
Yeah, right. Because if we're measuring for success of an OKR program here, you are in danger of kind of asking people about almost irrelevant things, I suppose, that's going to skew
Sure.
the data somewhat.
Sure. Yeah.
So you've done plenty of implementations then Reid. What are your top 5 mistakes to avoid when launching an OKR program?
Yeah. Well, number one is skipping that program design.
Yeah.
And I understand when folks, a lot of times organizations we work with, they've been reading about OKRs for a long time and getting excited and doing a lot of self-education. And some groups within the organization are already writing their own OKRs.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sense that they're ready. All they need is the software to turn on so they can just start using OKRs. And the reason why we always push back and say, let's get a clear program design in place first, is because it's almost like playing a game. If there's no clear set of rules for how you're supposed to play the game, you're probably just going to introduce a lot of confusion and frustration when you flip the switch and turn on this platform. I've been in trainings before where we've rushed an implementation and we don't have clear answers in form of a program vision, which is why are we doing this and why now, or clear guidelines, what's supposed to happen when and at what level. And when you get in that room, people question everything, right? Why is my OKR quarterly and not annual? What if I have a goal that really is 2 years? And you get into these debates about the rules, the rules of using OKRs.
Yeah.
And you're not really debating the value that the team is trying to get out of them, right? And you can never go back to that foundation, which you should have, which is your program vision, right? And a good program vision, Lawrence, should explicitly be rooted in, hey, as an organization, we struggle with these pains. I think it would be hard to argue that we've had a poor track record of commitment or focus with our priorities, right? Everyone is scattered and has a million projects in progress, right? So if you clearly explain where you're coming from and those pains, and you say OKRs are a means to achieve focus and better commitment, you can always return to that when people start spinning their wheels about why is it 3 to 5 objectives? Why are we checking in quarterly, right? There's a reason why we're doing it. It's not just a made up methodology that we're trying to prescribe for no reason.
Yeah, and what I always say to my clients as well is that the second worst thing you can say when somebody asks you a question, like those ones you've given examples of there, is I don't know.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is give an answer that's different to one that a fellow manager is giving to his team, because then you do have carnage in the organization. And it's so much easier if you've done that program design first, so
Yeah.
there's consistency throughout.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lawrence. And then the fact of giving an answer that's inconsistent with what another manager has said, this is a great reason why
Yeah.
you don't want people to, you don't want overconfident groups to just sort of forge their way ahead,
Mm.
because you only have that one chance to communicate a really clear, consistent message when you're rolling out. You have to sort of untangle all of these different threads if people are, um, you know, they're going out on their own and rolling out their version.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, mistake number two then.
Yeah, mistake number two. Mistake number two is probably giving up when the going gets tough. So it's funny, right? We're working very hard up front to build a program that fits with the culture and desired outcomes of an organization, and we're
Mhm.
trying to give clear guidelines so that people will be successful. Right? We're not going to let them out into the wild with no protective gear, right? But we still have to share this concept that all OKR programs evolve as well.
Mhm.
So you're starting with the baseline, clear expectations, but you might learn after 1 quarter, after 2 quarters, that especially within a particular group, you might have to change the cadence of your check-ins. It doesn't work for you to go monthly. You actually need weekly or bi-weekly,
Mm.
right? Hey, maybe we thought we wanted uh, we wanted these department level OKRs that were owned by the team, but actually we want them to be owned by particular leaders for better visibility. Those sorts of things are hard to understand and decide up front to 100% accuracy. You really have to just start running with the program to learn what feels good and what doesn't, right? So giving up when the going gets tough really means that, hey, we went through a quarter, we went through 2 quarters, and some things didn't work or didn't feel right.
Yeah.
uh, you can't scrap it. You have to say that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Let's change it so it does feel right, and let's not get rid of this program where we actually are becoming more focused and committed, because it didn't quite fit the first go around.
Mm. And to be honest, evolution and retrospective should be part of that program design at the beginning. That needs to be built into the timeline of OKR events as well.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, with your experience with that, Lawrence, is the idea to look back at the program outline every quarter or every 6 months. How do you tend to
Um,
like to look back and do that retrospective?
to be honest, for me, it's not overcomplicating it. It's
Yeah,
speaking to teams and asking them to fill in a really simple survey of what did you like and think we should do more of? What do you think we need to keep, but we should change the way we're doing it? Or what do you think is just a complete waste of all our time and therefore we need to get rid of? And just send that simple survey out to people. And you're not going to get 100% respondent rate, but that's
right.
okay. Otherwise, you would have thousands of responses to deal with. But also, people can't complain about the system if they've not sent their ideas in to be monitored, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then it comes down to that program lead that you mentioned at the beginning to kind of sift through the responses, and they'll get fewer and fewer as time goes on. Sift through the responses, decide what's good ideas, what aren't good ideas, and then speak to the managers and exec teams about how they might want to embed those changes and
yeah.
try that. And for me, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I like that. And again, surveys are your friend for gathering
Yeah.
that information at scale.
But it's that if people don't vote, then they don't get a say sort of thing.
Yeah,
You give them
absolutely.
their option to have a voice, which is really important because it is a collaborative exercise. Um,
Yeah,
and if they don't use that voice, then they can't really complain.
yeah. And but thinking about how you can evolve a program, it's always useful to understand what you're asking from the entire organization, right?
Mm.
As sort of a baseline expectation versus, what might be useful for one particular group, right? So in the example I gave, maybe it was an engineering department that wanted to change the cadence with which they met as a team.
Hmm.
Sometimes that piece of information is not necessarily something you have to now apply across the whole organization and say, hey, our guidelines have been updated and everyone has to check in
Mm.
weekly or biweekly now. But what you can do is you can understand why engineering made that change and
Yeah,
then share with the rest of the organization, hey,
exactly.
this sort of model could work for you as well, but it's not prescribed, right? If the current cadence of monthly check-ins works, absolutely keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. Um, any more mistakes?
Yeah, let me a couple more that I think are worth talking through are letting perfect become the enemy of good. And to me, what this really means is becoming overly precious with the OKRs as you're writing them. And the problems with this, especially at a leadership level, are you start valuing this idea of we have to have the right objectives before we start working on them,
Mm.
to the detriment of your team actually having time to execute,
Yeah,
right? So every day, every week that you delay getting your objectives written is one fewer day or week to start working on them and start talking about
mm.
how you're going to execute as a team or as an organization.
Mm.
And I think if there's any element that you can't um, negotiate as part of an OKR program, it's the amount of time you have in a quarter or in a year. So you got to find a way to get your OKRs written in a form that is strong and that your team is ready to commit to, even if it's not perfect. And that's scary for folks, but if you can't do it consistently quarter over quarter, then you're just going to inevitably fall into a pattern where you only have time to do this once a year. And suddenly you're writing traditional MBOs that don't really become a part of your way of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is usually my strongest argument for people rolling no cars down to team level rather than individual level as well. It's just the sheer time
Oh
um,
yeah.
that has to be dedicated to this. Um,
Yeah. And this
yeah,
is
people can but just make a beast for their own back, I suppose, and you lose the value because you spend
exactly.
so much time trying to set it up.
Exactly. And you're not trying to replicate the complexity of your business. You're trying to simplify. And so this is an area where your program lead is really crucial
Mm.
to understand what these timelines are, these windows for getting different levels of OKRs in, and really
Yeah.
making sure those deadlines are hit.
And again, it's really important that they have that executive team sway because it's got to
Right.
start with their OKRs. Otherwise, there's nothing to align into.
Right. Right. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah, so they have to be able to crack the whip a little bit there and get those OKRs in on time for everyone else to get theirs done.
Yeah. And that's why your program lead needs that sort of influence with executives. Absolutely, Lawrence.
Cool.
And
Right.
maybe,
You said there was another one then.
yeah, one more that I wanted to call out, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, which
Mm.
is, um, we call it over cascading, or this idea that at an executive level, you are writing OKRs that you are uh, essentially planning. You're planning the whole quarter for the whole organization, and you're trying to make sure that each level below is connected, directly contributing all the way up to your top level OKRs. And I see this typically as a core misunderstanding of what we're trying to achieve with OKRs, which, we want a process that helps people become connected to the strategy quarter over quarter. Um, and to do that, you need something that's agile. You need a sort of team of team model where these, self-organized teams can make decisions within a framework without having to depend on leadership for approval, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we see over cascading where we're measuring alignment within uh, Betterworks, and we see that alignment where OKRs actually contribute progress up is 80, 90, 100%.
Yeah.
That might be a bad sign that this is being used as a tool to just assign work down.
Sounds
really
again more like MBO to me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is what's tricky, is something that's so attractive about OKRs is the promise of better alignment, right? So as a leader, you want to know that people are working on things that you care about. But if you go back to Andy Grove's philosophy around management, is he as a leader never wanted to be making decisions on the on the front lines when it came to engineering. Even though he used to be an engineer,
Yeah.
he wanted to trust the folks that he just hired out of the best and brightest schools in the country to make those sorts of decisions, right? So
enough money to do so.
yeah, exactly. So we call it over cascading, but it's really understanding that your job is not to predict and direct everything from the top. It's to communicate a really powerful and inspirational vision, which then becomes this idea of commander's intent. Any team can look at that and understand what they can do within the framework to add value.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and if people are listening to this podcast without listening to one that I recorded a couple of weeks ago, I would encourage them to go back to listen to that one. I think we called it OKRs as a network, not a hierarchy, and it's actually talking really about the same point. And it's interesting that you use the term over cascading, because we've actually banished the word cascading from our vocabulary because of exactly what you say. It leans towards this sort of waterfall approach of, well, if I've got to sign 5 clients, each of my sales managers have to sign 1 client, and that's now their objective, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you've got to be really careful with it, because you lose all strategic value. So we've stopped using the term cascading, and like I said, we don't even like this hierarchy approach. We tend to think of OKRs now as a web or a network, and you're providing, the job of the exec team, senior leadership team, whatever you want to call them, is to provide that nucleus right at the core, of the vision and the top level directives. And then that web needs to expand to where it's strategically relevant. And that might be multiple teams working on one objective. That's great if we can get some cross-functional working going through it. It might be a team lower down the organization directly aligning into that top level objective and skipping a couple of layers out because they're the most strategically relevant team to work on it. And when people start thinking of it like that, they realize they don't need to sort of dilute this focus.
Right.
And people can be a lot more agile and come in and out and allow this web to grow, as I keep on saying, where it is strategically relevant and strategically powerful for the organization, rather than just layer of OKR after layer of OKR after layer of OKR, in the hope it will get to the people that need to do the work before you've had some sort of Chinese whispers effect where actually what they're working on and what they think they're supposed to be doing is completely different to what you had in your head at the top of the tree. So yes, I agree, Reid.
I like that idea of the web and get away from the hierarchy, and even banishing the word cascade, because I mean, so much of this is language when we're talking about change management, and cascading has a lot of negative connotations for folks and is connected with MBOs and other goal methodologies. And
Definitely.
And I, I'll have to look into whether we should banish it as well. What we've done is we've only used cascading in the same breath as we explain the concept of laddering, right? So we would never say, hey, it's your job to cascade and leave it at that. We would say cascading alongside laddering can help you create the top down and bottoms up alignment.
Yeah.
But I think you have a great point of maybe just avoiding that word altogether.
Yeah, it helps. And to be honest, the people on the ground kind of like it when you say that, because it's a bit more empowering for them. It makes them realize that their contribution is going to be very important. That bottom up approach that you mentioned there, rather than just having their goals cascaded down to them.
Yeah.
it's a bit of a statement, I suppose. No, we're banishing the word cascading from the organization.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, cool. We actually mean we're going to do something decent here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe I'll just come back to this quote that I really like for Measure What Matters. And I try to share with leaders when we're kicking off a workshop, but I know it starts with leadership must get across the why as well as the what. And I think this, again, ties into, without trying to predict and direct every initiative in your organization from the top down with your OKRs, you're just explaining the why. You're trying to create that nucleus, as you said. That's a vision and a direction, but a vision and direction that is inspiring and exciting. And that's a good way to help, I think, to help leaders understand their role when we say we're going to take away the ability to cascade.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you're actually adopting this new sort of more powerful function, which is to inspire and set the vision.
Let your employees surprise you. Give them the autonomy to do it.
Right.
Well, Reid, it's been a fascinating discussion. So much for our listeners to take out of it. I wouldn't be surprised to get the feedback that they're listening to it 2 or 3 times, to be honest, to make sure they've absorbed it all. But same question for you to end on that I ask all our guests, which is really, if you had one top tip to give to a business leader, either about to launch OKRs or has just launched OKRs within their business, what would it be?
The one top tip?
Yeah.
I would say embrace the struggle.
Right.
I think if you're diving into this and your first go around, for example, of writing OKRs, and you say, hey, we pulled together the executive team for 2 hours to write our OKRs, and it ended up taking us 6 hours to actually finish because there was so much heated debate. Instead of looking at that as a negative, our 2-hour meeting ballooned into 6 hours, I think you can look at it as a huge positive, which is, hey, there was so much that was just assumed but not spoken about when we thought about and discussed priorities, that we finally have a model and a method to uncover what's really important, or to surface these ideas and have the right kind of discussion, so that we can commit to what's important for a quarter or for a year, right? So as you're starting out, always look at areas where it feels like a struggle and realize that that's a really valuable sign of growth or improvement. If it was as smooth and seamless as the old version of goal setting you're coming from, then it's probably adding as much value as the old.
Yeah, you want to change for a reason, right?
For sure.
Yeah, it's that.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, it's that old age adage of nothing worth doing is easy.
Sure. Yeah, and we don't want it to be painful, but the grappling with these new ideas and having meaningful discussions and thinking deeply, that's, to me, that's the point. So embrace the struggle of it.
Absolutely. I love it. Reid, thank you so much. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. I hope to speak again soon.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, thank you again for joining us on this episode of Giant Talk. A really great one, I'm sure you'll agree. As ever, if you've got any feedback for me, just drop me an email, Lawrence with a W, LAWRENCE @therebegiants.com. Or if there's anything else you want to chat through, just drop me an email or book a meeting with me at therebegiants.com. I'd be happy to chat to you all. But if not, stay safe, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.